The wind howled across the barren landscape of Virilia, a world encased in perpetual winter. Mountains jutted like jagged teeth against the dark sky, their peaks lost in swirling clouds of ice crystals. Far below, valleys stretched in silent desolation, buried beneath meters of pristine snow. In this frozen wasteland, temperatures remained well below freezing for months at a time, and today was no exception. The storm that had been building for days now unleashed its full fury, sending waves of snow and ice cascading down the mountainsides. Nestled against the northern face of one such mountain, partially protected from the worst of the gale, stood a small metal structure. Unlike the smooth, curved lines of most modern dwellings, this one appeared cobbled together from mismatched parts, a patchwork shelter of salvaged metal plates, reinforced joints, and improvised insulation. A thin trail of smoke emerged from a chimney pipe, quickly torn apart by the raging wind. Inside this unconventional dwelling, Carter adjusted the heat regulator on his stove, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision. The flames danced higher, casting flickering shadows across the cramped interior of his home. The space was meticulously organized, tools hanging on the walls, supplies stacked in labeled containers, a narrow bed pushed against one wall. Everything had its place, a system maintained with military discipline. Carter had been a soldier once. The evidence was etched into his posture, the way he scanned his surroundings, the efficiency of his movements. Now he was simply a mechanic, a man who had chosen isolation over the chaos of civilization. The scars on his face and the shadows in his eyes told stories he preferred not to share. "Third night," he muttered to himself, checking the external temperature gauge mounted beside the door. The digital display flickered, -47 degrees, the worst storm of the season so far. He added another log to the stove, watching as the flames engulfed it. After 15 years of service in the Interplanetary Defense Force, Carter had seen enough of humanity, its brilliance and its brutality. He'd saved lives and taken them, witnessed acts of astounding courage and incomprehensible cruelty. When his final tour ended, he'd used his settlement pay to build this place, high in the mountains of Virilia, where few would bother to venture. Here, surrounded by unforgiving nature rather than unpredictable people, he had found something resembling peace. The storm intensified, wind battering against the metal walls of his shelter. Carter moved to his workbench, tinkering with a small propulsion unit from his snowspeeder. His hands worked automatically, dismantling the component while his mind wandered. During the worst of the winter storms, he often found himself lost in memories of the war, the comrades he'd lost, the civilians he'd failed to save. The howling wind sometimes sounded like screams, and the isolation that usually comforted him felt oppressive instead. Carter was adjusting a valve when he heard it, a sound distinct from the constant roar of the storm, a soft scratching against the exterior wall of his shelter. He froze, listening intently, but the sound didn't repeat. Probably just ice crystals carried by the wind, he reasoned, returning to his work. Yet, minutes later, he heard it again. This time, the scratching was more deliberate, moving slowly along the eastern wall. Carter reached for the plasma pistol he kept beneath his workbench, his body tensing in response to potential threat. He hadn't encountered another person in months, and the wildlife on Virilia typically avoided human settlements, especially during storms of this magnitude. Just the wind, he told himself, but his training wouldn't allow him to dismiss it so easily. He moved silently to the small viewing port beside his door, peering out into the swirling whiteness. Visibility was nearly zero, the storm having transformed the world outside into a blank canvas of white and gray. He saw nothing unusual, but the scratching came again, now directly beside the door. Carter debated whether to open it. His instincts warned against exposing himself to the lethal cold, but 15 years as a rescue specialist had ingrained in him the responsibility to investigate any potential distress signal. He pulled on his thermal coat, secured his breathing mask, and gripped his pistol firmly. Taking a deep breath, he cycled the airlock and pushed the outer door open, just enough to peer outside. The blast of cold air struck him like a physical blow, searing his exposed skin despite his protective gear. Swirling snow immediately began to accumulate on his shoulders and head. He scanned the area directly outside his door, shining his light through the white veil of the blizzard. Nothing. He was about to retreat inside when his light caught something dark against the snow. Crouching down, Carter discovered a small piece of fabric, burned along one edge, half buried in fresh snow. He picked it up, noting that it was still warm despite the freezing temperature. Someone, or something, had been out here very recently, burning cloth. Carter's mind raced through possibilities. No one in their right mind would be out in this storm without proper shelter. The nearest settlement was over 100 kilometers away. The fabric had been deliberately burned, perhaps as a desperate attempt to generate heat. He pocketed the scorched cloth and retreated inside, securing the door behind him. That night, Carter slept fitfully, his pistol within reach. The storm continued unabated, but the mysterious scratching did not return. In the morning, he examined the fabric more carefully under the bright lights of his workbench. The material was unfamiliar, neither the synthetic fibers used in standard colonist clothing nor the thermal weave of professional expedition gear. It had an unusual sheen to it, almost iridescent when viewed from certain angles. His curiosity piqued. Carter decided to set a trap. He prepared a package of emergency rations, high-calorie food bars, a self-heating canister of broth, and a small thermal blanket, and placed it outside his door. If someone was out there struggling to survive, perhaps this would help. If not, he would lose nothing but a few easily replaceable supplies. Throughout the day, Carter kept glancing at the external monitors he'd rigged up. The storm showed no signs of abating, visibility still severely limited. He worked methodically on his speeder, trying to focus on the task rather than the mystery outside. Occasionally, he found himself remembering similar situations during the war, huddled in makeshift shelters on hostile planets, listening to strange sounds in the darkness, never knowing if they signaled danger or just the unfamiliar fauna of alien worlds. By evening, the package remained untouched, half buried in fresh snow. Carter was both relieved and disappointed. Part of him had hoped for some explanation for the strange occurrence, while another part preferred the simplicity of continued solitude. As darkness fell, he secured his shelter for the night, checked his perimeter sensors one last time, and prepared for sleep. The scratching returned just after midnight. Carter bolted upright, instantly alert. This time, the sound was more persistent, moving methodically around the shelter's perimeter. He grabbed his pistol and moved silently to the control panel, activating the external lights. The sudden illumination revealed nothing but swirling snow. Yet the package he'd left was gone. In its place was another piece of burned fabric, larger this time, deliberately placed where the package had been. Carter stared at the monitor in disbelief. Whatever was out there had taken his offering and left something in exchange, a primitive form of communication. Against his better judgment, Carter decided to venture outside again. He donned his full thermal suit this time, checked his pistol's charge, and cycled through the airlock. The storm hit him with redoubled fury, the wind nearly knocking him off his feet. He braced himself against the wall of his shelter, scanning the surrounding area with a powerful flashlight. His beam caught movement in the distance, a shadow disappearing behind an outcropping of rock. Carter followed, fighting against the driving snow. The tracks left in the snow were unusual, narrower than human footprints, with an unfamiliar gait pattern. They led to a small crevice in the mountainside, partially sheltered from the direct force of the wind. Inside the crevice, Carter found more burned scraps of fabric and, disturbingly, what appeared to be hair, long strands of a silvery purple color, unlike anything he'd seen before. The implications were clear. Someone was burning their own clothing, perhaps even their hair, in a desperate attempt to generate heat. In these temperatures, such measures would buy only minutes of warmth at best, a temporary respite from certain death. Carter returned to his shelter troubled by what he'd found. He increased the sensitivity on his perimeter sensors and set up a basic thermal scanner to detect any life forms in the vicinity. Throughout the remainder of the night, the scanner registered nothing, as if whatever lurked outside existed at the same temperature as the frozen landscape. By morning, Carter was exhausted and increasingly anxious. The storm had intensified further, rendering his external cameras nearly useless. He tried to distract himself with work, but found his attention repeatedly drawn to the monitors. The mystery visitor did not return during daylight hours. As evening approached on the fourth day of the storm, Carter made a decision. He prepared his shelter for a potential guest, clearing space, setting out medical supplies, and ensuring his weapons were readily accessible but not overtly threatening. Whatever, or whoever, was out there was clearly intelligent and desperate. His military training had taught him to be cautious, but his years as a rescue specialist compelled him to help. He left another package outside, larger this time, containing food, a proper thermal blanket, and a basic communication device. Then he waited, watching the monitors intently as darkness fell. Hours passed with no sign of his mysterious visitor. The storm began to diminish slightly, visibility improving enough to make out the basic contours of the landscape surrounding his shelter. Carter found himself dozing at his monitoring station, the strain of the past sleepless nights catching up with him. The alarm from his perimeter sensor jolted him awake. Something had triggered the outermost detection ring. Carter checked the monitors and saw a figure moving slowly toward his shelter, stumbling, falling, rising again with visible effort. The thermal scanner remained curiously blank, but the visual feed clearly showed a humanoid form. Without hesitation, Carter activated the exterior lights and moved to the airlock. Plasma pistol, holstered but accessible. He cycled the outer door open and stepped out into the storm. The figure was closer now, perhaps 20 meters away, illuminated by the harsh lights mounted on Carter's shelter. She, was clearly not human, though humanoid in basic form. Her skin was a pale lavender color, with darker purple markings visible where her clothing had been torn away. She was barefoot in the snow, her limbs painfully thin, her silvery purple hair matted with ice. Most of her clothing appeared to have been burned away, leaving only ragged remnants that provided almost no protection against the cold. Her eyes, when they met Carter's, were entirely silver, with no visible pupil or iris. They reflected his lights like mirrors, giving her an otherworldly appearance that might have been terrifying under different circumstances. In this moment, however, she looked only desperate and afraid. She took another stumbling step toward him, then collapsed face down in the snow. Carter moved instantly, crossing the distance between them in seconds. He knelt beside her, checking for vital signs. Her pulse was faint and erratic, her breathing shallow. Her skin felt cool to the touch, far too cool for any warm-blooded creature to survive. Without ceremony, he gathered her into his arms and carried her toward the shelter. She was surprisingly light, her body seeming to lack the density of human musculature. As he carried her, she stirred slightly, those silver eyes opening to fix on his face. Her lips, tinged with blue-purple, moved as if trying to speak, but no sound emerged. Then her eyes closed again as consciousness slipped away. Inside the shelter, Carter laid her carefully on his bed, cranking up the heating system to its maximum output. He moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving medical supplies, checking for injuries, monitoring vital signs. Her physiology was unfamiliar to him, making it difficult to assess her condition accurately. But the principles of treating extreme cold exposure were relatively universal. He wrapped her in thermal blankets, applied warming packs to her core areas, and prepared a nutrient solution that should be safe for most humanoid species. The burns on her arms and legs appeared self-inflicted, consistent with his theory that she had been burning her own clothing for warmth. These he treated with antimicrobial gel, covering them with synthetic skin patches. Throughout his ministrations, Carter found himself wondering who and what she was. Her species was unfamiliar to him, despite his extensive experience with various alien races during his military service. Her clothing, what remained of it, bore no insignia or identifying markers. She carried no technology, no weapons, nothing to indicate her origin or purpose on this isolated planet. Hours passed as Carter maintained his vigil. The storm outside began to abate, the howling wind diminishing to a persistent moan. Inside, the shelter was almost uncomfortably warm as the heating system labored to raise the ambient temperature. Carter removed his thermal gear, monitoring his patient's vital signs, which had stabilized but remained weaker than he would have liked. Just before dawn, she opened her eyes. Carter was checking the burn on her arm when he felt her gaze. He looked up to find those silver eyes fixed on him, fully conscious now and filled with a mixture of fear and wary calculation. She tensed, drawing away from his touch. "You're safe," Carter said, keeping his voice low and even. "I found you in the snow. You're suffering from extreme cold exposure and burns." She stared at him without comprehension, then spoke in a language he didn't recognize, fluid and melodic, with clicks and trills that human vocal cords couldn't easily reproduce. Seeing his confusion, she switched to another language, then another, before finally attempting heavily accented standard. "Why, not let die?" Her voice was raspy, as if unused to speech. Carter considered his response carefully. "Because I'm human," he said simply. "And because no one deserves to die alone in the snow." She seemed to process this, her silver eyes never leaving his face. "Human," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Carter." She gestured toward the name stenciled on his thermal suit, hanging nearby. "Yes, I'm Carter. What's your name?" She hesitated, then touched her chest. "Sierra." The word sounded approximated, as if she were translating it into something he could pronounce. "Sierra," he acknowledged. "Can you tell me what happened to you? How did you end up out there in the storm?" Fear flickered across her features. She sat up abruptly, then swayed as dizziness overtook her. Carter steadied her with a hand on her shoulder, feeling the unusual texture of her skin, smooth, like polished stone, but warm and yielding. "Must go," she said, trying to rise. "They follow." "Who follows?" Carter asked, gently but firmly preventing her from standing. "You're in no condition to go anywhere. The temperature outside is still lethal." Sierra's gaze darted to the door, then back to Carter. Her thin fingers clutched at the thermal blanket. "Hunters," she whispered. "Find me, find you, kill both." Carter's expression hardened. "Let them try," he said, his hand unconsciously moving toward his plasma pistol. "But right now, you need rest and food. The storm will hide your trail, and my shelter is shielded against most scanning technologies. We have time." She studied him intently, then seemed to deflate, her brief surge of energy dissipating. "Time," she repeated. "Little time." "Enough to eat," Carter insisted, retrieving a container of broth he'd prepared. "This should be safe for your physiology. Most proteins are universal enough." Sierra eyed the steaming container with unexpected horror, shrinking away from it. "Fire!" she said, her voice breaking. "No fire." Carter frowned, confused by her reaction. "It's just heated broth. It will help warm you from inside." She shook her head violently, silver-purple hair whipping around her face. "Fire is..." Punishment. Pain. She gestured toward the burns on her arms. Had to use. To live. But fire is... She struggled for the word. Torture. Understanding dawned. Where you come from? Fire is used as torture? Carter asked gently. Sierra nodded, her gaze fixed on the stove across the room, where flames were visible through the vents. Only for punishment. Only for pain. Carter set the broth aside. Here. Fire keeps us alive, he explained. Without it, we would freeze to death. The fire in my stove isn't for hurting anyone. It's for warmth, for cooking food, for survival. She listened intently, but her expression remained skeptical, her body tense. Carter didn't push the issue. Instead, he retrieved a container of fruit preserves, sweet, calorie-dense, and requiring no heating. Try this instead, he offered. Sierra accepted the container cautiously, sniffing its contents before taking a small taste. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly consumed the rest, revealing a hunger she had been suppressing. Carter provided more food, protein bars, dried fruit, anything nutritious that didn't require heating. She ate methodically, her silver eyes constantly moving between Carter and the door. How did you get here? Carter asked when she had finished eating. Virilia isn't exactly a tourist destination. Sierra's expression darkened. Punishment, she said. Left to die. She gestured toward the burns on her skin again. Marked first, then abandoned. Who did this to you? My people. She touched the back of her neck, where Carter noticed a small, intricate scar partially hidden by her hair. I broke rules, spoke truth, used weapons. Each phrase was delivered with a mixture of defiance and pain. Women not allowed. So punishment. Carter felt a surge of anger at the injustice implied by her broken sentences. Your people left you here to die because you're a woman who spoke up and defended herself? Sierra nodded. Simple death too kind. Cold death. Slow death, better lesson. Her silver eyes took on a harder glint. I refused. Survived 3 nights. Used clothes for fire. She touched the tattered remains of what had once been a garment. Burned little each night, then saw your smoke. She mimicked the motion of flames rising. Followed, watched, afraid. Afraid of me? Humans known, she explained. Some help, some hunt, some sell. Her thin shoulders lifted in a shrug. Gamble. Carter understood. She had taken a desperate chance approaching his shelter, knowing he might be as dangerous as the cold. The realization humbled him. You're safe here, he assured her. I won't hurt you or turn you over to anyone. You can stay until you're recovered. Sierra watched him for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth in his features. Finally, she nodded once. Grateful, she said simply. Carter gave her privacy to rest, moving to his workbench where he could process what he'd learned. Her story, fragmented as it was, painted a disturbing picture, a society where women were restricted from using weapons or speaking out, where fire was reserved for torture, where exposure on a frozen planet was considered appropriate punishment for disobedience. He'd encountered many cultures during his service, some with practices he found abhorrent, but few so casually cruel. More concerning was her mention of hunters. If her people had abandoned her specifically on this planet, in this remote location, they must have access to sophisticated technology and interstellar travel capabilities. The fact that they might return to verify her death, or ensure it, suggested resources and determination beyond what Carter had prepared to face in his self-imposed exile. He glanced at his weapons cache, considering options. His shelter was defensible, but not designed to withstand a determined assault. If Sierra's hunters came in force, with advanced weapons, they would be significantly outmatched. Running was equally problematic. The storm had diminished. but conditions outside remained dangerous, and his snowspeeder was currently disassembled for maintenance. While Sierra slept, Carter took inventory of his supplies and checked his security systems. He had basic perimeter sensors, enough weaponry for a small firefight, and sufficient food for 2 people for perhaps a month, if carefully rationed. His communication system was intentionally limited, part of his desire for isolation, but included an emergency beacon that could summon planetary authorities if activated. Using such a beacon would end his anonymity forever, exposing his location not only to potential rescuers, but to anyone monitoring official channels. It was a last resort, one he hoped to avoid. By evening, Sierra had awakened again, stronger than before. She sat up cautiously, watching as Carter prepared a meal at his workbench, deliberately using cold rations rather than the stove. "You not use fire," she observed. "For me?" Carter nodded. "You need time to understand that fire here is different from fire where you come from. There's no rush." Sierra's expression was unreadable, but she inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. "Your home's strange. Metal walls. No others." "I prefer to be alone," Carter explained, bringing her a portion of the meal. "After the war, I'd had enough of people. Enough noise. Enough conflict. Enough complications." "War?" Sierra accepted the food, her movements more coordinated now. "You fighter?" "Soldier," Carter corrected. 15 years in the Interplanetary Defense Force. Specialized in hostile environment rescue operations. I pulled people out of danger zones, battlefields, natural disasters, industrial accidents. Sierra considered this. Save lives. "When I could," Carter agreed, the old weight of those he couldn't save pressing on him momentarily. "Not always." They ate in silence for a while, Carter giving her space to eat at her own pace. When she had finished, Sierra gestured toward the stove, where the flames continued to dance behind the metal grating. "Tell about fire," she requested. "Why not fear?" Carter chose his words carefully. "Fire is a tool, like any other. It can harm or it can help, depending on how it's used. Where I come from, we learn about fire as children, how to use it safely, how to respect its power." He moved to the stove, adjusting the flame height. "In a place like this, fire means life. Without it, the cold would kill us." Sierra watched the flames with obvious discomfort, but didn't look away. "In my world, fire only for punishment, only for pain, burn marks." She touched the scars on her arms. "Show disobedience. Show shame." "Here, they show survival," Carter countered. "You used fire to stay alive, despite your fear of it. That's not shameful. That's courageous." She seemed startled by this interpretation, her silver eyes widening slightly. "Not thought this way." "Maybe it's time to consider new perspectives," Carter suggested. "The universe is vast. No single culture has all the answers." Sierra pondered this, her gaze still fixed on the dancing flames. "Your fire. Contained," she observed. "Controlled." "Yes. That's the key to using fire safely. Understanding it, respecting it, controlling it." Carter demonstrated by adjusting the stove settings, showing how the flames responded to his commands. Sierra watched intently, her fear visibly battling with curiosity. "Could learn? If you want to," Carter said, careful not to push. "At your own pace." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp beeping from the security console. Carter moved quickly to check the display, tension instantly returning to his posture. The perimeter sensors had detected movement, not the random patterns of wildlife, but the deliberate progression of something approaching the shelter. Sierra was immediately alert, rising shakily to her feet. "They come," she said, her voice hollow with certainty. "Hunters." Carter scanned the readings, his military training taking over. 3 life forms, he confirmed. Approaching from the east, moving slowly, probably trying to avoid detection. He looked at Sierra. Friends of yours? Her silver eyes had gone cold. Not friends. Executioners. Carter nodded once, accepting her assessment. Can they be reasoned with? No reason. No mercy. Sierra's entire demeanor had changed, fear giving way to a stillness that spoke of deep resolve. They follow orders, find target, eliminate. Then we need to prepare, Carter said grimly. He moved to a storage compartment built into the wall, entering a complex code on its panel. The door slid open to reveal an arsenal more extensive than his isolated lifestyle might have suggested. He removed a compact plasma rifle, checking its charge, then selected several smaller weapons. Sierra watched him with evident surprise. You prepared for war. Old habits, Carter said, not elaborating on the paranoia that had led him to maintain such a cache, despite his supposed retirement. He held out a shock baton, a close combat weapon designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Can you use this? Sierra stared at the weapon, then slowly reached out to take it. Women forbidden weapons, she said softly. Death penalty. You're already sentenced to death, Carter pointed out. Might as well die fighting. A grim smile flickered across her alien features. Yes, she agreed. Die fighting. Carter quickly outlined a simple defense strategy. The shelter's design included several reinforced positions and emergency exits. If necessary, they could retreat into the network of natural caves that extended behind his dwelling, though the extreme cold would make that a desperate last resort. Sierra listened attentively, asking questions that revealed a mind quick to grasp tactical concepts despite her claimed lack of training. When Carter demonstrated how to activate the shock baton, she held it with unexpected familiarity, her body naturally shifting into a balanced stance. You've used weapons before, Carter observed. Sierra's expression hardened. Watched, learned secretly, practiced alone. Her free hand touched the burn scars on her arm. Caught, punished, but remembered. Carter nodded in understanding. Muscle memory. Your body doesn't forget, even when your mind wants to. He'd seen it countless times in fellow soldiers, the unconscious retention of combat training, emerging in moments of crisis. As they completed their preparations, Carter checked the external cameras again. The approaching figures were visible now, 3 humanoid forms, moving with predatory grace through the snow. Like Sierra, they appeared to be unaffected by the extreme cold, wearing minimal protective gear. Unlike her, they were heavily armed, carrying what looked like energy weapons and close combat blades. They're almost here, Carter said, securing the main door. Last chance to run. Sierra moved to stand beside him, shock baton gripped firmly in her hand. No more running, she declared. End here. One way. Her silver eyes met his. Why you help? Your fight not. Carter considered the question. Why was he risking his life for an alien stranger, inviting conflict after years of seeking peace? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. Because sometimes the right thing and the easy thing aren't the same, he said. And because I've spent too long hiding from life instead of living it. Sierra studied him for a moment, then nodded as if he had confirmed something important. Ready, she stated simply. The hunters made no attempt at subtlety. They approached the main door directly, their forms clearly visible on the external cameras. They were of the same species as Sierra, with the same lavender skin and silver eyes, but taller, more heavily muscled, their bodies marked with elaborate scarification patterns. Their expressions were blank, focused, devoid of emotion. Sierra! The leader called out in heavily accented standard. Exit structure, accept judgment, quick death offered. Carter looked to Sierra, who shook her head slightly. Lies, she whispered. No quick death. The hunter called again. Human inside, release female, no harm to you if comply. Carter stepped closer to the door, keeping out of direct line with the entrance. "There's no one here by that name," he responded loudly. "Move on." A pause followed. Then, "Last warning. Female fugitive property of magistracy. Harboring criminal. Death penalty both." Carter glanced at the weapons in his hands. Then at Sierra, standing tense but determined beside him. In that moment, he made his final decision. "She's not property," he called back. "She's under my protection. Leave now if you want to live." The response was immediate. A blast of energy that struck the door, scorching the metal, but failing to penetrate the reinforced material. Carter nodded to Sierra, then activated the shelter's defense protocol. External lights shut off, plunging the area outside into darkness, while internal systems shifted to combat mode. "They'll try to force entry," Carter predicted, moving to a defensive position with a clear line of fire to the door. "Be ready." Sierra took position on the opposite side, her body coiled with tension. "3 hunters," she said quietly. "Elite killers, bone armor beneath skin. Hard to kill." "Everyone dies if you hit them hard enough," Carter replied grimly. The hunters' next attack was more coordinated. 2 energy blasts struck the door simultaneously, followed by a physical impact that suggested they were using some kind of battering implement. The reinforced door held, but a warning light on Carter's control panel indicated the locking mechanism had been damaged. "Door fails soon," Sierra warned. "Then inside." Carter nodded. "Let them come. Confined space works to our advantage." He adjusted his grip on the plasma rifle. "When they breach, I'll fire first, center mass. You go low, take out their legs if possible." Sierra acknowledged with a quick nod, her silver eyes reflecting the emergency lighting with an almost predatory gleam. The transformation from the terrified, freezing woman he'd rescued to this focused combatant was remarkable. Whatever her society's restrictions on female combat training, Sierra clearly possessed both natural aptitude and secret practice. The door shuddered under another coordinated assault, the metal beginning to warp inward. Warning indicators flashed across Carter's control panel. Structural integrity compromised. Breach imminent. He took a deep breath, falling back on years of combat experience to steady his nerves. "Remember," he told Sierra, "they're expecting you to be weak, untrained. Use that assumption against them." She bared teeth that were slightly sharper than human norm. "Not weak, never weak." With a final devastating blow, the door tore partially free of its frame, creating an opening large enough for the hunters to enter. Cold air and swirling snow immediately began pouring into the shelter. Carter squeezed the trigger of his plasma rifle, sending a bolt of superheated energy through the breach. The shot caught the lead hunter directly in the chest, throwing him backward into the snow. Carter had expected at least temporary incapacitation, but to his shock, the hunter rolled to his feet almost immediately, apparently protected by some form of armor or natural resilience. "Bone armor," Sierra reminded him, darting forward with unexpected speed. She ducked beneath a return blast from the second hunter, sliding across the floor to strike at his legs with her shock baton. The weapon connected, sending arcs of electricity through the hunter's body. He staggered but remained standing, swinging a bladed weapon toward Sierra's head. Carter fired again, this time aiming for the hunter's exposed neck. The plasma bolt struck true, and this time the effect was decisive. The hunter dropped, flesh seared where the bolt had connected. 1 down, 2 to go. The third hunter had held back, assessing the situation. Now he charged through the damaged door, firing an energy weapon that forced Carter to dive for cover. The bolt struck Carter's workbench, sending tools and components flying in all directions. Several struck the stove, damaging the control panel and causing the flames to surge dangerously. Sierra had disengaged from the second hunter, who was recovering from the shock baton's effects. She circled warily, weapon ready, silver eyes tracking every movement. When the hunter lunged, she sidestepped with fluid grace, bringing the baton down on his extended arm. Bones cracked audibly, and the hunter's weapon clattered to the floor. Carter, meanwhile, found himself pinned down by accurate fire from the third hunter, who had taken position just inside the doorway. The plasma rifle was designed for medium-range engagement, not the close-quarters battle now unfolding in his small shelter. He set it aside, drawing a compact projectile weapon instead, more primitive than energy weapons, but devastating at close range. The moment the third hunter paused his barrage to adjust position, Carter rose and fired 3 rapid shots. 2 struck the hunter's torso, apparently absorbed by his bone armor, but the third found his eye, a vulnerability in otherwise formidable natural defenses. The hunter collapsed without a sound, dark purple blood pooling beneath him. Sierra was still engaged with the second hunter, who fought with desperate ferocity despite his injured arm. He had produced a secondary weapon, a curved blade that glinted in the emergency lighting. Sierra evaded his slashes, but found herself backed against the damaged stove, flames leaping dangerously close to her. Carter saw panic flash across her features as the fire licked at her clothing. Her momentary distraction gave the hunter an opening, and he lunged forward, blade aimed at her throat. Sierra froze, caught between her terror of the flames and the immediate threat of the blade. In that critical moment, something remarkable happened. Sierra's expression shifted from fear to resolute fury. She stepped into the flames, using the hunter's shock at her action to duck beneath his strike. The fire caught at her tattered clothing, but she ignored it, driving the shock baton directly into the hunter's midsection with all her strength. The electrical discharge, combined with her unexpected maneuver, finally overcame the hunter's resistance. He convulsed violently, then collapsed, his blade clattering harmlessly to the floor. Sierra immediately stepped away from the flames, batting at her smoldering clothing. Carter moved quickly to her side, helping extinguish the small fires that had caught on her garments. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, checking for burns. Sierra was trembling, but her silver eyes were clear and focused. "Used fire," she said, her voice filled with wonder and residual fear. "Chose fire over blade." "You did," Carter confirmed, a note of pride in his voice. "You faced your fear when it mattered most." She glanced at the fallen hunters, her expression hardening. "All dead?" Carter checked each body quickly, professionally. 2 dead, 1 unconscious but alive. He indicated the second hunter, the one Sierra had finally subdued. "What do you want to do with him?" Sierra considered the question, conflict evident in her expression. "In my world, answer simple. Kill enemy. Always." She touched the burn scars on her arm thoughtfully. "But perhaps, new perspectives." Carter nodded in understanding. "We secure him. Then, when he wakes, maybe we get answers." The immediate threat neutralized. They turned their attention to the damage to the shelter. The door was beyond quick repair, the frame warped, and the locking mechanism destroyed. Carter jury-rigged a temporary barrier using spare metal plating, but it wouldn't hold against a determined assault or the next severe storm. More concerning was the damage to the heating system. The stove's control panel had been hit during the firefight, causing the flames to burn unregulated. Carter managed to shut off the fuel supply, but without repairs, they would have no sustainable heat source, a potentially lethal situation given Virilia's climate. "Power cells damaged too," Carter noted, examining his system diagnostics. "We're running on emergency backup, maybe 24 hours before we lose all environmental control." Sierra studied the unconscious hunter, then the damaged shelter. "They have ship," she said decisively. "Not far. Must track hunters. Find ship. Use communications." Carter considered the plan. It was risky, venturing out into the cold, potentially facing more hunters, but with the shelter compromised, they had limited options. "Can you walk that far? You're still recovering." Sierra straightened. determination evident in every line of her body. "We'll walk. We'll run if needed." She gestured toward the fallen hunters. "Take weapons. Take armor if fits. Prepare." They worked quickly, salvaging what they could from both the hunters and the damaged shelter. Carter packed essential supplies, emergency rations, medical kit, portable power cells. Sierra stripped the hunters of their weapons and useful gear, her movements efficient despite her recent ordeal. The surviving hunter was bound securely and left in the shelter. He would eventually free himself, but not before they had a substantial head start. Carter briefly considered a more permanent solution, but something in Sierra's eyes when she had chosen restraint over execution had resonated with him. Perhaps they both needed to prove they were better than those who had condemned them. Before leaving, Carter retrieved one final item from his personal storage, a small emergency beacon of his own design. Unlike the standard planetary distress signal, this one operated on military frequencies he still had access to from his service days. He activated it, setting it to transmit their location and a coded distress message. If any former colleagues were within range, they might respond, though in this remote region, the chances were slim. "Ready?" he asked Sierra, securing his pack and checking his weapons one last time. She stood in the doorway, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The storm had passed, leaving a deceptively peaceful scene of pristine white beneath a clear, star-filled sky. She had dressed in a combination of her remaining clothes and items taken from the hunters. The mismatched ensemble oddly appropriate for her transitional state. Neither victim nor warrior, but something in between. "Ready," she confirmed, stepping out into the snow without hesitation. They moved quickly, but cautiously, following the hunter's trail back toward what Sierra believed would be their landing site. The cold was intense, their breath forming crystalline clouds with each exhalation, but the absence of wind made it bearable with their scavenged gear. Sierra led the way, her natural adaptation to the cold environment evident in her sure-footed progress. Carter followed, close behind, scanning their surroundings for threats. The night was eerily silent, the snow absorbing sound, creating an illusion of isolation despite the violence they had just survived. "How far do you think?" Carter asked, after they had been traveling for nearly an hour. Sierra paused, surveying the terrain ahead. "Close now. Hunters always keep ship near. Quick escape." She pointed toward a ridge in the distance. Beyond there, hidden in valley. They proceeded with increased caution as they approached the ridge. Carter's combat instincts were on high alert, scanning for sentries or automated defenses. The hunters' apparent confidence in their mission suggested they might have left their ship unguarded, but he wasn't willing to bet their lives on that assumption. As they crested the ridge, a small valley opened before them, and in its center sat a sleek spacecraft. The vessel was unlike any Carter had seen during his service, organic in design, with flowing lines that mimicked natural forms, rather than the utilitarian angles of most interstellar craft. Its surface appeared to be a combination of metal and some biological component, giving it an unsettling, almost living quality. "No guards visible," Carter observed, surveying the area through compact field glasses. "Automated defenses?" Sierra studied the ship from their vantage point. "No standard defenses. Ship recognizes handlers." She touched her neck, where the small scar was located. "Genetic key. I have similar mark, but not hunter class. May not work." "So we need one of the hunters," Carter concluded. "And we left the survivor back at the shelter." Sierra's expression became thoughtful. "Not need living hunter. Need genetic material only." She gestured toward the dark stains on her borrowed clothing, blood from the fallen hunters. "This enough, if fresh." Carter was impressed by her quick adaptation to their circumstances. Despite her claimed lack of formal training, Sierra displayed a natural talent for tactical thinking. "Worth a try," he agreed. But we approach carefully. Any other surprises I should know about? Ship semi-conscious, Sierra explained. Bonded to hunters. Will resist strangers. She hesitated, then added, Can communicate. We'll try. They descended into the valley, moving from cover to cover, despite the apparent absence of guards. As they drew closer to the vessel, Carter could discern more details of its unusual construction. What had appeared to be decorative patterns from a distance were actually a network of vein-like structures running throughout the hull, pulsing faintly with a purple-blue luminescence. "It's alive," he murmured in fascination. "Part alive," Sierra corrected. Symbiotic technology. Ship and pilot connected. She approached the vessel's hull, placing her palm against one of the pulsing veins. Must convince ship hunters dead. Need new pilot. Carter watched as Sierra closed her silver eyes, her expression becoming intensely concentrated. The veins beneath her hand pulsed more rapidly, the glow intensifying. After several tense moments, a section of the hull began to shift, reconfiguring itself to create an opening. "It recognized you?" Carter asked in surprise. Sierra removed her hand, appearing slightly drained by the effort. Recognized species, sensed hunter blood, confused but compliant. She gestured toward the opening. "Will remain open briefly. Must enter." They slipped inside the vessel, finding themselves in an organic-looking corridor that curved toward what presumably was the control center. The interior maintained the exterior's blend of technology and biology, with control surfaces that appeared grown rather than manufactured. The lighting was diffuse, emanating from the same vein-like structures that adorned the hull. Sierra moved with increasing confidence through the ship, her familiarity with its layout suggesting she had at least some knowledge of such vessels, despite her non-hunter status. Carter followed, alert for any signs of automated defenses or remaining crew members. The control center, when they reached it, defied conventional spacecraft design. Instead of separate stations for different functions, the room contained what appeared to be a central pool of luminescent fluid, surrounded by contoured surfaces that might serve as resting places rather than chairs. No obvious control panels or displays were visible. "How do we operate it?" Carter asked, studying the alien configuration. Sierra approached the central pool, her expression solemn. Direct neural interface. Pilot immerses, connects with ship consciousness. She glanced at Carter. Dangerous for non-hunter. Not designed for human physiology. "And for you?" Carter asked, already suspecting the answer. "Also dangerous," Sierra admitted. "But possible. Have observer training, not pilot. Basic knowledge only." Carter weighed their options. The shelter was compromised, unlikely to sustain them through another severe storm. Remaining on Virilia meant eventual discovery by more hunters, or death from exposure. The ship represented their only realistic chance of escape. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Decision made. Sierra gestured toward several organic-looking protrusions near the pool. "Monitor life signs. If connection fails, pull me out immediately." She began removing the outer layers of her scavenged clothing. "Process intense. May appear distressed. Don't intervene unless critical." Carter nodded, positioning himself beside the indicated monitoring stations. Although the alien technology was unfamiliar, the principles of life support monitoring were universal enough that he could identify the patterns indicating normal versus distressed vital signs. Sierra approached the luminescent pool, visibly steeling herself for what was to come. She met Carter's eyes one last time. "If fail, ship self-destruct. Run immediately. Use escape pod." She pointed toward a small corridor leading from the main control room. "Survival chance low, but exists." "We'll both make it," Carter asserted, more confidently than he felt. Sierra's lips curved in a slight smile, the first he had seen from her. Then she stepped into the pool, submerging herself in the glowing liquid. The fluid enveloped her immediately, seeming to respond to her presence by increasing in luminosity. Her body went rigid, then began to convulse slightly as the neural connection established itself. Carter watched the monitoring stations intently, recognizing patterns that indicated stress but not immediate danger. The ship around them seemed to awaken further, the pulsing veins throughout the structure beating faster, like a heart rate increasing. Soft vibrations ran through the floor and walls, suggesting systems activating throughout the vessel. Minutes passed, feeling like hours as Sierra remained submerged in the pool, occasionally twitching or trembling. The monitoring stations fluctuated between concerning and stable readings, keeping Carter in a state of constant vigilance. He found himself silently urging her to succeed, not just for their survival, but because he had come to respect her resilience and determination in the short time they had known each other. Suddenly, the entire ship shuddered. External viewports that had been dormant flickered to life, displaying the snowy landscape outside. The luminescent fluid in the pool began to recede, revealing Sierra's form. She emerged gasping, her silver eyes wide, her body trembling with exertion. Carter moved to her side immediately, helping her from the pool. "Did it work?" Sierra nodded weakly, her voice raspy. Connection established. Limited control gained. She leaned heavily against him, the ordeal having clearly drained her substantially. Ship, confused, expects full hunter crew, resisting solo command. "What does that mean for us?" Carter asked, helping her to one of the contoured surfaces where she could recover. "Can launch, can navigate, cannot engage advanced functions." She gestured toward the viewports, where the landscape was now visible from multiple angles. Basic flight possible. Interstellar travel, uncertain. It was better than nothing. "Where can we go?" Carter asked. "Your people will be looking for this ship, and for you." Sierra's expression hardened. "Not return to my world. Death certain." She considered for a moment. "Neutral territory. Trading post on Gallus 3. Many species. Few questions. Possible sanctuary." Carter knew of Gallus 3 by reputation. A frontier world on the edge of regulated space. Home to a diverse population of merchants, refugees, and those seeking to disappear. Not entirely lawless, but selective about which laws it chose to enforce. A reasonable destination for two fugitives. "How long to get there?" 3 days in standard drive, Sierra estimated. "If ship cooperates." She straightened, visibly gathering her strength. "Must attempt launch soon. Connection temporary without full hunter bond." Carter helped her position herself beside the pool, where she could maintain partial contact with the luminescent fluid without full immersion. The ship responded to her commands, systems engaging throughout the vessel. External scans showed no immediate threats in the vicinity. The hunters had apparently been confident enough in their mission to come alone, without backup. The launch sequence was unlike anything Carter had experienced in conventional spacecraft. Rather than the mechanical vibrations of engines engaging, the ship seemed to awaken like a living creature, stretching and orienting itself. The sensation was disconcerting but effective. They rose smoothly from the valley floor, ascending rapidly through Virilia's atmosphere. Sierra maintained her concentration, communing with the ship through her partial connection with the pool. The strain was evident in her expression, beads of sweat forming on her lavender skin despite the cool temperature of the control room. Carter monitored the life sign displays, ready to intervene if her condition became critical. As they broke free of the planet's gravitational influence, Sierra directed the ship toward the coordinates for Gallus III. The vessel responded sluggishly, clearly resistant to her commands, without the full hunter crew it was designed for. Nevertheless, they established a course, the stars outside the viewport shifting as they oriented toward their destination. "Drive engaging," Sierra announced, her voice strained. "Will require periodic guidance. Cannot maintain continuous connection." Carter understood the implication. We'll take shifts. You guide when necessary, rest when possible. She nodded gratefully, withdrawing her hand from the pool as the ship settled into its programmed course. The moment the connection broke, she sagged with exhaustion, and Carter moved quickly to support her. He helped her to one of the contoured resting surfaces, where she immediately fell into a deep sleep, her body demanding recovery from the multiple traumas of the past days. While Sierra slept, Carter explored the vessel, familiarizing himself with its layout and functions as best he could given its alien design. He discovered food storage areas containing provisions that appeared suitable for Sierra's physiology, though potentially toxic for humans. His own rations would suffice for several days if carefully rationed, and the ship appeared to have water reclamation systems that would serve them both. The escape pods Sierra had mentioned were indeed present, small, self-contained units designed for atmospheric entry and short-term survival. They appeared to function independently of the main ship's consciousness, making them a viable emergency option if the vessel turned against them. Most interesting was what appeared to be a communications array, though its interface was as organic and unfamiliar as the rest of the ship's systems. Carter studied it without attempting to activate it, knowing that unauthorized transmissions might reveal their position to pursuers. Still, its presence was reassuring, a potential resource if they found allies or reached neutral territory. Sierra woke after several hours, immediately checking the ship's status through brief contact with the pool. Course maintained, she reported, sounding relieved. Ship accepts basic programming between connections. Simplifies journey. Good news, Carter acknowledged. I've found food and water systems, and what looks like sleeping quarters. We should be able to manage 3 days. Sierra nodded, then hesitated, her silver eyes studying him with new intensity. Why continue? She asked suddenly. Could leave me with ship. Return to life. No pursuit for you alone. The question caught Carter off guard, though he realized it was entirely rational. They were, after all, strangers thrown together by circumstance rather than choice. I could, he agreed. But what kind of life would I be returning to? Isolation? Waiting for the next storm to bury me? He moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars streaming past. I left the war because I was tired of death, tired of fighting other people's battles. I went to Virilia looking for peace, but found only emptiness. He turned back to Sierra. Helping you feels right in a way nothing has in years. I'm not ready to give that up. Sierra absorbed his words, a complex mix of emotions crossing her alien features. Understand emptiness, she said finally. In my world, women are vessels, not persons. Empty purpose. She straightened, a new determination in her posture. Choose different path now. Choose own meaning. Then we both have something to look for on Gallus 3, Carter concluded. A fresh start. The journey proceeded in cycles of activity and rest. Every few hours, Sierra would connect with the ship's consciousness, correcting their course and ensuring vital systems remained functional. Between these sessions, they took turns sleeping and standing watch, gradually establishing a rhythm that allowed both to recover their strength. During quiet periods, they shared more of their respective stories. Carter spoke of his military service, the comrades he had lost, the disillusionments that had led him to seek isolation on Virilia. Sierra described her world, a rigidly hierarchical society where women were considered property, where she had secretly educated herself by eavesdropping on the lessons given to her brothers, where her questioning of authority had been considered not just disobedience, but heresy. Final offense was defense, she explained during one such conversation. Male attacked, would have taken by force. I fought back, used his own weapon, killed him. Her expression showed no remorse. Son of important family. Unforgivable crime for woman to harm, Self-defense is recognized as legitimate in most civilized societies, Carter assured her. On Gallus 3, your actions wouldn't be condemned. Sierra considered this with evident wonder. Different worlds, different rules. She touched the burn scars on her arms, which were beginning to heal under Carter's medical care. These marks meant shame. You said, meant survival. Her silver eyes met his. Both true. Meaning changes with perspective. Carter was struck by her adaptability, her willingness to reconsider fundamental assumptions despite a lifetime of indoctrination. You learn quickly, he observed. Must learn or die, she replied simply. Always been so. On the second day of their journey, they encountered the first significant challenge. Sierra, during her regular connection with the ship, detected an anomaly in the propulsion system, something that would have been routinely handled by a full hunter crew, but presented a critical problem for their limited operation capabilities. Drive destabilizing, she reported, her voice tense as she maintained contact with the pool. Requires physical intervention. Engineering chamber has damage. Carter immediately volunteered. Tell me what to look for, what to do. Sierra guided him to a chamber deep within the vessel, where the biological and mechanical components of the ship's propulsion system merged in a complex array of pulsing tissues and metallic conduits. Following her instructions, delivered via a communication link they had established, Carter identified the problem, a rupture in one of the organic components, leaking a viscous fluid that was corroding surrounding systems. Describe exactly, Sierra demanded, maintaining her partial connection with the ship's consciousness. Carter detailed what he was seeing, the extent of the damage, the color, and consistency of the leaking fluid. Circulatory breach, Sierra diagnosed. Ship self-repair possible but requires stimulus. She instructed him to locate a specific type of nodule among the organic components, a regulatory organ that could accelerate the vessel's healing process if properly activated. The procedure was unlike any repair Carter had performed during his military service. Following Sierra's guidance, he manipulated the nodule in specific patterns, essentially communicating with the ship's biological systems directly. The organic components responded, the ruptured tissue gradually sealing itself, the flow of corrosive fluid stopping. Remarkable, Carter murmured, watching as the ship literally healed before his eyes. Symbiotic design, Sierra explained when he returned to the control center. Adapted from natural organisms on my world. Efficient, self-sustaining, but requires understanding of biological principles. Your people have impressive technology, Carter observed. Despite their social structures, Sierra's expression darkened. Advanced in some ways, primitive in others. She disconnected from the pool, having stabilized their course once more. Technology serves hierarchy, reinforces control. They encountered no further technical difficulties as they approached Gallus III. On the final day of their journey, the planet appeared in their viewports, a swirling mass of blues, greens, and browns, with visible lights on its night side indicating substantial settlements. Sierra established connection with the ship one last time, guiding them into a standard approach vector. Trading post located in northern continent, she explained. Neutral territory, multiple species, anonymous arrival possible. Carter prepared for landing, securing loose items and checking their limited supplies. They had decided to abandon the hunter ship after arrival. Its distinctive design would make them too easily identifiable to pursuers. Instead, they would seek alternative transportation once planetside, using the limited currency Carter had carried from Virilia and whatever resources they could salvage from the vessel. The ship entered Gallus III's atmosphere smoothly, Sierra's connection with its systems ensuring a controlled descent, despite her limited training. They approached a sprawling settlement nestled between mountain ranges. Its architecture, a chaotic blend of various species building styles and technologies. Landing area ahead, Sierra announced, directing the ship toward an open field at the settlement's outskirts. Automated traffic control minimal here. Good for anonymous arrival. They touched down without incident, the ship settling onto the uneven ground with organic grace. Sierra disconnected from the pool for the final time, her expression containing a mixture of relief and apprehension. Free of ship. Vulnerable now. Carter checked the weapons they had salvaged from the hunters, ensuring both were armed before opening the vessel. We stay together. Move quickly. Find secure location to plan next steps. Sierra nodded, gathering the few possessions they were taking. Emergency rations, medical supplies, and a data pad Carter had given her from his own supplies. The device was simple but would allow her to begin recording her experiences, preserving her perspective as she had never been allowed to do in her former life. As they prepared to disembark, Carter noticed Sierra hesitating beside the luminescent pool. She dipped her fingers into the fluid one last time, seeming to communicate something final to the ship's consciousness. "Saying goodbye?" Carter asked. Sierra withdrew her hand, watching the fluid ripple and settle. "Setting self-destruct," she corrected. "Delayed sequence, 2 hours. Ship cannot return to hunters." Carter was surprised by her foresight but recognized the tactical wisdom. The vessel contained too much information about them, could be used to track them if recovered. "Good thinking," he acknowledged. They exited the ship into the warm, humid air of Gallus III, a stark contrast to Virilia's frozen environment. The settlement bustled with activity despite the late hour, lights and sounds indicating a diverse, vibrant community. Various spacecraft were visible in the distance, coming and going from more formal landing facilities. Sierra surveyed their surroundings, silver eyes wide as she took in the chaotic mixture of species and structures. "Never seen such mixture," she admitted. "My world isolated, homogeneous." "Cultural diversity has its advantages," Carter replied, guiding them toward the settlement proper. "More perspectives, more solutions, more opportunities." They moved through the outskirts of the trading post, attracting curious glances, but no overt hostility. Sierra's alien appearance was unremarkable in a place where dozens of species conducted business, and Carter's human form was common enough to avoid special notice. They located a modest lodging establishment that accepted anonymous guests, securing a small room using some of Carter's limited funds. The room was basic but secure, a place to rest and plan their next steps away from prying eyes. Sierra examined the simple furnishings with evident curiosity, running her fingers over textiles and materials unfamiliar to her. Carter secured the door and checked for surveillance devices out of long habit, finding none. "We're safe for now," he announced, setting down their meager possessions. "We should rest, then figure out our longer-term strategy." Sierra nodded, but remained standing by the room's single window, looking out at the bustling settlement. "What next?" she asked quietly. "For you? For me?" It was the question that had been forming in both their minds throughout the journey. What future could they build from such desperate beginnings? Carter joined her at the window, watching the diverse beings moving through the streets below. "I have some contacts from my military days," he said thoughtfully. "People who owe me favors, who might help us establish new identities, find legitimate work. Nothing glamorous, but enough to build upon." "Together?" Sierra asked, her silver eyes meeting his. Carter hadn't explicitly considered this aspect of their future. Their alliance had been born of necessity, a shared fight for survival. Yet, in the short time they had known each other, he had found more purpose and connection than in years of self-imposed isolation. "If you want," he offered, "we make a good team. But you should have the freedom to choose your own path now. That's what you fought for." Sierra considered his words, her expression thoughtful. "Choice precious," she agreed. "Never had before." She turned from the window to face him directly. "Choose to stay. For now. Learn. Grow stronger. then decide again. It was a practical approach, neither an eternal commitment nor a hasty separation. "That sounds reasonable," Carter agreed. "We'll figure it out as we go." Sierra nodded, satisfied with this arrangement. She moved to the small table where Carter had placed the datapad he'd given her. "Will record journey," she decided. "My words, my story. No one to forbid." "No one to forbid," Carter echoed, recognizing the profound significance this simple act held for her. In her former society, women were denied the right to record their own experiences, to define their own narratives. This small device represented a freedom as important as their physical escape. While Sierra began her records, Carter checked the news feeds available in their lodging. He found no mention of their escape or the missing hunter ship, suggesting the incident might have been contained by Sierra's people to avoid revealing their activities to the wider galactic community. This was encouraging. It might mean pursuit would be limited, rather than widespread. As night deepened over Gallus III, they took turns resting, maintaining the watch rotation they had established on the ship. Through the window, they could see a transport vessel passing high overhead, its lights tracing a path across the star-filled sky, continuing onward without any interest in the small drama unfolding in one modest room below. In the early hours of morning, Sierra stood by the window, watching as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. Carter, awake for his watch shift, noticed her silhouette against the gradually brightening sky. Her silvery purple hair moved gently in the breeze from the partially opened window, her posture more relaxed than he had yet seen it. "The sun feels different here," she observed without turning. "Warmer, softer." Carter joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Different star, different atmosphere. The light spectrum is probably more compatible with your physiology than Virilia's was." Sierra nodded, lifting her face to the strengthening rays. She placed one hand over her heart, a gesture Carter had noticed her make before in moments of significance. "Not to burn," she whispered, "but to warm." The simple phrase captured their entire journey, the transformation of fire from instrument of torture to source of life, the possibility of finding warmth and connection after cold isolation. Carter reached into his pocket, removing a small object he had fashioned during their journey from materials found on the hunter ship. "I made something for you," he said, holding out his palm to reveal a small pendant shaped like a stylized flame, crafted from a fragment of the ship's luminescent material. "To remember." Sierra stared at the offering, her silver eyes reflecting the soft glow emanating from the pendant. With delicate fingers, she lifted it from his palm, examining the craftsmanship with evident wonder. "Beautiful," she murmured. "Fire as protection, not punishment." "Exactly," Carter confirmed. "A reminder that meaning changes with perspective, that you can choose what symbols mean to you now." Sierra slipped the pendant around her neck, the glowing flame resting against her lavender skin like a small beacon. Outside, the sun of Gallus III rose fully above the horizon, bathing the trading post in golden light. Below their window, the settlement was coming alive with the activities of a new day. Beings of countless species emerging to trade, to work, to live according to their own choices. "New day," Sierra said, turning to face Carter. Her silver eyes held a clarity and purpose that transformed her entire countenance. "New story begins." Carter nodded, feeling a sense of possibility he had thought lost forever in the frozen wastes of Virilia. "New story," he agreed. "One we write ourselves." The pendant glowed softly between them, a symbol of transformation, of fire that warms rather than burns, and of doors opened that could never again be closed.